In New York this week, UN Special Envoy on Ebola, David Nabarro, briefed the General Assembly on the outbreak's progress.
Now, the pattern of the outbreak has changed, ladies and gentlemen. We've got now 10% of the cases that we had in September. It's tantalizing. You keep thinking we're nearly there. And yet, getting the last 10% into treatment and making sure that all the contacts are properly traced, that's the hard part.
Dr. Nabarro said it's critical to remain vigilant as the number of incidents has recently increased in both Sierra Leone and Guinea. Necessary resources are continuing to be deployed there. The UN Food Agency, FAO, announced that it will invest $5 million into its Ebola response program in Guinea to help people who have been severely affected. Also this week, the head of the UN Development Program, UNDP, made her way through Liberia, Guinea, and Sierra Leone to figure out how the UN can help in the early stages of Ebola recovery. Helen Clark sat down with country leaders and community organizers who have spearheaded efforts to combat the virus and have taken in children orphaned by Ebola. And in Liberia, after a 7-month break, children are heading back to school. The UN Children's Fund and its partners say they have taken the necessary precautions to minimize the risk of transmission there. According to the UN, over 9,300 people have died from the Ebola virus in Guinea, Liberia, and Sierra Leone. Despite a ceasefire endorsed by the UN Security Council this week, fighting in eastern Ukraine, which has already displaced nearly 1 million people, continues. The UN's food agency is scaling up its emergency operation to feed close to 200,000 people affected by the conflict.
World Food Program is providing food assistance in the form of food vouchers in the areas where markets are still functioning. So this is the relatively stable areas. Near the front line, WFP is providing the traditional food ration.
Many of the people who have been uprooted from their homes since the start of the crisis have exhausted their life savings, are unable to access jobs, and are facing drastically higher food prices. In the coming months, WFP says it will need $9 million to run the expanded humanitarian program until June.
It's a drop in the ocean. The needs are great. Right now we're prepositioning food, hoping that the ceasefire will hold and we're able to push food to over 60,000 people near the front lines.
The United Nations launched a new initiative in South Sudan this week to ensure that out-of-school children can continue their education. UNICEF's Back to Learning campaign aims to reach children in all 10 states of South Sudan, including those engulfed in conflict. War in the country has effectively ended learning for some 400,000 children and adolescents, bringing the total number of children out of school to 1.4 million. Disruption to education has harmed an already weak education system that reached at most 42% of school-aged children and saw only a 10% completion rate. In major conflict-affected states, the United Nations mission in South Sudan says that over 2/3 of schools are closed. The $42 million campaign aims to reach 200,000 children in conflict areas and 200,000 more in calmer areas of the country.